At the end of last week's parsha, we'd read how Noach was given the task to turn around the generation because they sunk to a level of evil. And God says, I give them 120 years to turn around. If they repent and they better the ways, I will not destroy the world. Otherwise, the world will be destroyed with a great flood. Noach was given the task that he is essential in entering into dialogues with them, and hopefully through his initiative, people will make the corrections in their lives and God wouldn't have to destroy the world. Ultimately, he didn't succeed. And this week we read about the world was destroyed. And God says to Noach, build a teva, build an ark with specific dimensions. It's a 3-tiered ark. The upper level was for Noach and his family. The middle level was for all the living species in existence, meaning non-kosher species. It was the male and the female, whether it was undomesticated, domesticated, reptile, insects, one male, one female. The kosher species, it was 7. And they came into the ark, and the future was going to be preserved, that they're encapsulated in this bubble, which God will allow them to exist for 12 months. After 12 months, the world will no longer exist because it will be obliterated with the great flood. And then new existence will emerge from this ark. Now, let's try to understand what was the dimension of the ark. How big was it? So the Torah tells us the ark is 300 cubits in length. Let's say a cubit is maximum 2 feet. That means it's 600 feet long. 100 feet wide, and 60 feet high. You got it? The upper tier is only for Noach and his family. Second is the animals and all the food. The lower level was for the waste. All the waste of the animals. Okay? The animal waste. Maximum 600 feet long. 100 feet long, wide, and 30 feet high. If you'd want to put in 2 elephants, 2 rhinoceroses, and 2 water buffalo, pretty much it's occupied. But here, every non-kosher species, 2 male and female, birds, reptiles, insects, everything. Could it really fit into such a small location? Impossible. It was a miracle. They just kept going in and in and in. Miracle. So if God has to perform a miracle to contain this unlimited number of living creatures, what did Noach have to bother building this ark according to specification, which God set the specifications? It's an obvious question. Questions asked by Nachmanides, by Ramban. He could have had them in suspended animation. They could have existed. There's nothing beyond God's ability. Here, it's a miracle. So the Ramban explains that the ark initially was not to preserve all living species. That wasn't the main. Noach was involved in a project for 120 years, because Noach was a world-renowned personality, that people would immediately, when they notice him embarking on this project, which is going on forever, they'll say, Noach, what's happening? What are you building this for? So it would evoke the question, and he would say, you realize you people are not behaving properly. God came to me and said, if you people don't turn around in 120 years, existence comes to an end. God will destroy the world with a great flood. So the building of the ark was only the setting to attract the attention. They should enter into a dialogue with Noach. And he responded. After he went through this back and forth, this dialogue with them, they would say, Noach, we hear what you're saying, but if anybody's going to be destroyed, it's you and your family, not us. We'll continue with our behavior, whatever that behavior is, bestiality, adultery, incest, murder, stealing, everything. We will continue. If anybody's going to be destroyed, it's you and your family. And every year on the anniversary of the starting building of the ark, all humanity would gather around Noach and say, Noach, where's the great flood? When's it happening? And he'd get involved again, presenting his position. You people will regret your words because ultimately the world's going to be destroyed. And again, they would repeat, if the world's destroyed, it'll be you and your family, not us. And what happened after 120 years? Noach did not succeed. If God gave him the task to enter into dialogue, that means initially Noach had the ability to succeed. Noach failed. He did not succeed. And as a result of that, Noach is held accountable for the destruction of the world. Because if you could have succeeded and you did not succeed, because if he couldn't have succeeded, what's the point of God giving him this task? The answer is he could have. And because he failed, the flood waters of the Mabul, of the great flood, are referred to in prophets as Mei Noach. It's the waters of Noach. The flood waters identify as it's Noach's flood waters because he failed. So what was the value of building that ark? It should be a focal point of gathering to create this inquisitiveness, enter into dialogue. Now it's up to humanity. They make a choice. Either they repent or God's ending this world. Unfortunately, the world was ended. And Noach was told, you and your family must go into that ark. So let me ask you, if a person's working on a project for 120 years, and God says, go into the ark, did Noach go into the ark? Immediately. No. The Torah tells us, why did Noach go into the ark? Because the floodwaters forced him into the ark. But if not for the floodwaters forcing him to the ark, he wouldn't have gone in. He somehow was living delusion, it's not happening. But when he saw the water rising and he had no choice, that's when he went into the ark. So the obvious question is, if a man invests 120 years of his life building the ark and getting involved in this dialogue, if you don't, the world will be destroyed. Now it's ready for real time to be destroyed. And God says, go in because it's going to happen. He doesn't go in. And only the floodwaters forced him in. How do we understand it? At this moment, all humanity exists. I'm not sure what the numbers was, all humanity. God is saying to Noach, when he says go in, he says it's over. The world not being destroyed, it's because you failed. And is it something easy to accept? The weight of that consciousness. You could have, you didn't. As a result of that, you're held accountable for this. You're at fault. A person will not leave any stone unturned to somehow frame it. It's not happening. It's not going to happen. But God says it's happening. The words did not penetrate his mind, his emotion. He was too overwhelmed by hearing this. That means he has to acknowledge and accept the fact that he failed. the millions of people who exist in existence, all existence, and the animals and all living species are going to be obliterated. Therefore, until he saw it was reality, it was not a reality. That's what it was. Now, when Noah came out of the ark, what was the first thing he did? He planted a vineyard. And he became a vineyard keeper. And he produced wine. What did he do with the wine? He became drunk, the Torah tells us. Drunk to the point where when he was in a drunken state, his son Chum, there's a question what he did to him. Either he castrated him, or he castrated and sodomized him, both. Now, a man who's as holy as Noach, and the Torah testifies, he's tzaddik, he's devoutly righteous, he's perfect in all his generations. And he finally found special favor in God's eyes. How do you get yourself drunk? Now, we said to go in, he had difficulty going in because he hadn't accepted reality, he failed. Now he's preoccupied for 12 months caring for all the species in the ark. But now when he's gone back out into the world, when he opened that door of that ark, what did he see? He saw a pristine existence. Not one solitary human being on the face of the earth. Before, the world was teeming with human beings. What happened now? They all perished. There's not a trace of their existence. Why? He knows he failed. So the reason why it's human reign, as the Germans, Yimach Shema said, Juden reign, it's attributed to his failing. You could have made a difference and you didn't make the difference. With that level of guilt on your head, on your emotion, the only way you can deal with it, you have to take the escape route. What was the escape route? He drank to the point that he was drunk. He was not in touch with the reality of the world. It was too much for him to deal with. But that was the reality. So you see, even a tzaddik, if a tzaddik comes to the realization that he failed and the failure is due to his own lack of a sufficient initiative. Now, how do you look yourself in the mirror? I mean, the equivalent of this was Jews. Warsaw at one time, pre-World War II, had 2.5 million Jews. You know what that is? 2.5 million. The streets were teeming with Jews, all kinds of Jews. Hasidic Jews, Lithuanian Jews, secular Jews, every kind of Jew under the sun. All kinds of communities. After World War II, we had the last vestige of Jews in Warsaw was the Warsaw Ghetto, which was destroyed by the Nazis. And the remnants that were left, they were sent off to concentration camps. The streets, the boulevards, the markets were cleansed of Jews. You know what this means? And the survivors of the Holocaust, when they came back from the concentration camps, many of them, they went back to their cities. You know what they saw? Not a Jew. And they believed maybe there were Jews there. When they came to that stark reality that it's Juden reign, many of them, they couldn't deal with it. They had to flee. But they had the property. They couldn't. They could not be in a location at one time was thriving and teeming. And today, the reality is all these people were murdered. And that's why you don't see a trace that brothers and sisters and infants and adolescents and parents, grandparents, everything gone. Due to what? To the bestiality of what? The demonic evil of the Nazis. They couldn't deal with it. Noach, where he could have made the difference. Proof of the pudding he could have because he was given the task. And God says, you failed, it's over. But you will survive, you and your family. So you say thank you. Thank you, but he can't say no thank you. Because factually, all mankind is called what? A non-Jew is called a Noahide. These are his descendants. To indicate there's nobody but his descendants. The world emanates from his three sons and his daughters-in-law. The portion begins, Ela told us Noach. These, now the word toldos could either mean children. These are the children of Noach, or it means these are the chronicles of Noach. It speaks about his legacy. Now, what's the legacy of a tzaddik? Is the legacy of a tzaddik his family, his progeny, or is the legacy of a tzaddik his good deeds? The Torah and his mitzvahs, his masim tovim, his good deeds. Well, evidently, according to one interpretation, which is the first Rashi cites from the Midrash, these are the toldos of Noach. So it's a little bit difficult. We're about to speak, toldos also means children, and we digress. Noach is tzaddik. Noach is a man who's devoutly righteous. Tomim, perfect. Hoyib Rosov. In all his generations that he lived, Esau Lukim Yislach Noach. And God walked with him. He was so special, God would walk with him, meaning accompanied him. But if we're talking about his children, the family, why do we discuss his spiritual standing? Tzaddik, Tomim, he was devoutly righteous, he was perfect. So Rashi cites the Midrash. Lomed. So from here we're able to extrapolate She'ika Tolosem Shel Tzaddik and Masim Tovim, that the primary accomplishments of a tzaddik are his good deeds. Because otherwise we should discuss his children immediately. Sheb Chomen Yefes. But we said no. What's primary to the tzaddik? His good deeds. Tzaddik Tomim. Not only is he devoutly righteous, he's perfect among all his generations. You know, the Mishnah Pirkei Avos tells us there was a story that there was a person, his name was Rabbi Yossi ben Kismo. He was traveling and he meets a Jew. And the Jew sees this holy rabbi and he says to him, Shalom Alecha, Rebbe Mori. Peace upon you, my teacher and my mentor. And he says to him, he says, you know, I come from a community. We need a rabbi. We need people like you. You name your price, we would like you to become a resident of our community. So Rabbi Yosef ben Kisma says to him, he says, your community where you are there other Torah scholars there? Are there scribes there? Are there members of the cloth? Are they there? He says, no. So he says, but if you come, we'll pay any price you request. We'll pay you. Diamonds, gems, gold, silver. So Rabbi Yosef ben Kisma answers me, he says, I will not go to a place unless there's a Jewish representation there, Torah representation. But you say, but look at the financial offer that you're making for me. He cites the verse in Prophets. Hashem says, Li akes v'li azov. God says, you know something, I have all the silver, all the gold in the world. If I want to endow you with gems and silver and gold, for God, it's not a problem. What are we interested in? We don't want to compromise our spirituality. But it's inevitable. You go to that kind of community, regardless of what they pay you, you're going to be compromised. I will only go to a city with their scribes and their Torah scholars. Otherwise, I would never consider it. That's what he told him. Because the only thing you could take out of this world, I don't care what kind of stock portfolio you have. I don't care what kind of real estate portfolio you have. You could be the president of the European Union and everything plus. When you leave this world, you know what you leave with. You leave in that pine wood box with shrouds and with your life's accomplishments. And life's accomplishments is not the real estate, the stocks, or anything else. It's your spiritual accomplishments. So what is Ika told the Seim Shel Tzaddik? What is the main legacy of a tzaddik? It's not his financial holdings. It's the spiritual holdings. That's the Masim Tov. Ika told the Seim Shel Tzaddikim, The primary is what? Is their spiritual accomplishments. That's what it's about. And that's what the Torah is revealing over here. When it speaks about the chronicles of Noach, it doesn't speak about his children. His children are secondary. Primary is his good deeds. He was a tzaddik. He was Tamid Dorosov. He was devoutly righteous in his generations. That's the understanding. So I saw something interesting today. I mean, I've saw the Medrash many times, but today it touched me differently. You know, in Sukkot, we take 4 species. We take the lulav, which is the palm branch. Its palm branch is the date tree. And then we take the esrog, which is the citron. And then we take the hadas, that's the myrtle, and we take the arova. We take the willow branch. So the Medrash tells us the lulav, which is the largest of the species, it's long. What does it represent? It represents fruit. But the lulav branch has no fragrance. It represents food, but no fragrance. The lulav, the esrog, the citron represents food, the meat of the citron, and it has fragrance. The willow, before the willow, the myrtle has fragrance, has no food value. That's the hadas. And the willow has neither. No fragrance, no food value. So what is it we speak about? So Midrash says, the tzaddik who has Torah. The Torah that's meat, that's edible. That is the food for one's spirituality. But it has fragrance. There's Torah and Masim Tovim, both. There's the Torah knowledge, plus he did mitzvahs. The palm branch, which is the date, you may have food, but fragrance you don't have. It doesn't represent Torah, it represents you did mitzvahs. The willow, which has fragrance, represents a person who studied Torah, doesn't have sufficient amount of mitzvahs. And the willow has neither, no fragrance and no food value. That's the Russia. So we have different segments of Klal Yisrael. The lulav represents one segment of Klal Yisrael, the Jewish people. The Jew who does mitzvos, but doesn't have Torah knowledge. The esrog represents the great Torah sage that has both mitzvahs and Torah knowledge. Then you have the Jew, observant Jew, but he doesn't study. So that's the what? That's the myrtle. There's fragrance, but there's nothing other than that. And then there's the evil person, he has neither. That's the willow. Now, of the 4 species, what is the primary species? The esrog. The esrog is the primary species. According to one opinion, the tree of knowledge, which is known as the Eitz Hadas, that they were not permitted to eat, was the esrog tree. The fruit, that was the fruit. So it's interesting. The fruit which represents, it's edible and it has fragrance. That's Torah. That's Torah mitzvahs. That's what it represents. And yet, which is the Torah sage, that's the fruit that they ate for the tree of knowledge. Seems to be contradictory. What's the contradictory? The law is if the person, let's say, he's a doctor, and somebody's life is in jeopardy, and the doctor has to intervene to save his life, and it's to violate the Shabbos. He's not permitted to hesitate. He has to violate the Shabbos. But he has a study session fixed. He's been studying with a study partner for years, a chavrusa. He has to cancel it. You know something? When it comes saving the Jewish life, everything you put on hold, and all that exists at that moment is attending to the life of that person, to save his life. That's what it's about. The esrog, which is Torah mitzvahs, it's the meat of the esrog, which is food value, edible, plus it has fragrance. That's the tree of knowledge. But I think if I participate of that, I'll be so imbued with holiness. Something, imbued with holiness, if it's God's holiness. If God says it's taboo, you're not permitted to cross that line. Regardless of what you believe, it will provide for you. It'll give me a sense of comfort and euphoria, this and that. You want to know something? If God says no, you're not permitted to partake of it. A woman has three mitzvahs which pertain to her personally. And we said every week in the B'mem Madlikin. What are the three mitzvahs which are unique to the woman? She observing the laws of menstruation, which is known as family purity. The mitzvah of tithing the bread, challah. Although a man has to tithe bread no different than the woman, but if you're in a family, the wife has priority on that mitzvah, tithing the bread and lighting the Shabbos candles. The woman has first rights on those mitzvahs. Although if a man is by himself, he has to light Shabbos candles. But if he has a wife present or a daughter, the daughter is the one who should light the Shabbos candles, not the male. Now, why? So Medrash says something interesting. Why did Adam eat of the tree of knowledge? Because his husband, his wife offered it to him. She says, I want you to eat. I ate, I want you to eat. And he ate. Now, when she fed him that fruit of the tree of knowledge, she was not permitted to eat. What did she do? Before he ate of it, he was an eternal being. He was not subject to death. When he ate of it, God says, the day you will eat, you will be subject to death. So for all intents and purposes, she took an eternal being and put limitation on him. You know what that's called? She shed his blood. By offering that fruit and insisting he eats, you shed his blood. Because you shed his blood, we have to have something to atone for that. The woman will menstruate, which is also the gushing of blood. Your losing blood will atone for shedding his blood, according to Midrash. Adam, before he had tree of knowledge, he was the handiwork of God. He was pure. What did she do when she gave him that fruit? She contaminated the purity of what he represented. So because you contaminated the purity of what he represented, therefore you have to reinstate it. So when you tithe bread, which has a holiness to it, it's given to the Kohen to eat, it has to be, you have that. That's your responsibility to tithe the bread. Because just as you contaminated chalosa shalom, the challah of the world, the portion which is unique and special, you have to reinstate it by creating new challah, a new holy entity which has purity. Just as you extinguished the light of the world, Adam was the light. He was the beacon of the world. He radiated where the angels had mistaken his radiance for God. You extinguish that. You minimize that. On Shabbos, you have to light candles to reinstate that. You have to reinstate that special level of light. These are why these three areas are asked to the woman when she's in childbirth, and if she doesn't keep them properly, it's a basis for prosecution. But these are unique to her. Family purity, lighting of Shabbos candles, and tithing of the bread. Now, the question is this. What is the menstrual cycle? Menstrual cycle is a cycle of life. When the sperm of the male fertilizes the ovum, what happens? It's the beginning of life. What did she do to Adam? She took an eternal being and she ended his life. So she's in a position that there's a cost factor for her. When the woman menstruates, that process is the life process. So a new ovum should grow to bring life again. The blood washes away that potential life. And now she starts over again. And there's the cycle. As long as she's fertile, before she reaches menopause, this repeats itself every month. That's what it is. But that we understand, that's me that connected me. That's a correction. You took his life, you have to restore. All life of mankind is restored due to that cycle, the menstrual cycle. But let's understand, you contaminated the challah of the world. Adam was the most special creation of all existence. You contaminated him. You created the deficiency in him. By you tithing the bread, that's a reinstatement. I mean, how is that? You want to say symbolically? No, but it seems to me that is a reinstatement of that. You extinguish the light of the world. When you light those Shabbos candles, you're bringing back that light that you extinguished. You know, the Gemara tells us, the Talmud tells us that hospitality, hachnosus orchim, is greater than receiving the divine presence in your home. Hospitality, hosting a person, has greater value in God's eyes than greeting him in your home. I mean, how's this possible? We can extrapolate it from a story in the Torah. God comes on the third day of Avram's circumcision to pay a sick visit. All of a sudden, Avram notices 3 wayfarers coming down the road. He says to Hashem, excuse me, I have to tend to the hospitality needs of these wayfarers. I mean, if you're middle speaking to having conversation with God, how do you interrupt the conversation to those 3 wayfarers? Evidently, what do we see from there? That the value of hospitality has even greater than having a dialogue with God. That's what you see. Now, every synagogue, every shul, every beis medrash, you always have, before services, you put on electric lights at the Amud, or you have 2 candles burning at the Amud, whether they're wax candles, oil candles, but that's what happens. Now, why do you light those candles? Because with the candles, that's an indication the Shekhinah is there, the divine presence is there. You always have a ner tomid in a shul. You have a 24-hour light burning continuously to indicate the Shekhinah, divine presence, is in that location. That's what you do. So when God's present, we light the candles. We pray to God. You have the abidah, you have the repetition. The candles are lit at the Amud. What about when you have guests coming for hospitality? Do you light candles? So there's a great tzaddik who lived in the 19th century, says, seemingly you should light candles. And he would light candles. Why? Because he says, if hosting hospitality has greater value than receiving God, so when God comes to your home, you put on candles. So you mean for the guest, where it's even valued to a greater degree, you shouldn't put on candles. You should light candles. Okay? Now, we light candles on Shabbos. What is the value of the candles? Because a person can't live in the dark. Because that's part of our function, to be able to see what we're doing, to be able to enjoy the food. Because visually, when you see the food, then you're able to internalize the value of the food more easily. That's what you do. She extinguished the light. Now, why do we light candles on Shabbos? When did the divine presence enter into existence? Do you know when? Friday night. God is coming onto the terrestrial level. The terrestrial level. That's Shabbos. The lighted candles are an indication to acknowledge God is here. That's what it's about. So therefore, why did Adam radiate the way he radiated? Because he was the handiwork of God. He was the closest thing to God himself. She went and extinguished that. She minimized him. He no longer was that receptacle for the divine presence. Well, what about if you have the potential to reinstate it, that it should be the basis for God's presence? Why does the woman light candles? To acknowledge the Shekhinah is entering into her homes. So therefore, that lighting corresponds to the ultimate illumination. What's the ultimate illumination? God's presence is present in our home. Friday night, when we come home from shul, we sing Shalom Aleichem. We sing this. It was an acknowledgement. We're accompanied home, but by angels. And that's the text. Boachem l'sholom. Orchuni l'sholom. Bless us for peace. You should come in peace. Bless us for peace. Tzeischem l'sholom. So we're talking, this is the Shekhinah. The Shekhinah is there. The Midrash cites a pasuk, a verse. Lokeach nefashos chacham. The word person who provides for the living, he merits to be wise. Yeah. Zazon umfarnis ani. A person who sustains and supports a poor man. There's a person you've actually given his life. You've given him his life. Without you, he wouldn't be alive, or be almost intolerable. By you providing, you gave him his life. You merit wisdom. Noach did not pass away until he saw the world settled, the new world. He saw the 70 root nations, which were his descendants. And what does Moshe only mention? Doesn't mention the families, he mentions his righteousness. Noach ish tzaddik tomei b'nei. That's his main feature. Now, if you have endless species in the ark, every species has its own type of food. Did he feed them one uniform food? They all ate the same thing? Or no, he attended to each one's particular preferences. What did he do? So the first opinion is, all the species, they were eating develis, pressed figs. That's what they ate, pressed figs. However, there are different periods when they would eat, okay? According to one opinion, the fruit of the Eitz Hadas was the te'ena, was the fig. Adam and Eve, they covered themselves with the fig leaves. Why did they cover themselves with the fig leaves? So Rashi, in last week's reading, cites the Midrash, because after he sinned, no tree would allow itself to give of its branches or its leaves to cover its nakedness. But because the fig tree was the species in which he had sinned, as a result of that, it allowed itself to shed its leaf, that it should be able to use the fig leaf to cover its nakedness for that reason. So it's interesting. The fig was the fruit which he sinned. What did Noach feed all the animals? One universal diet: dried pressed figs. I think we're going to stop here, just entertain some questions, and then we'll stop the class.